Julian Vance, CEO of a global tech conglomerate, stood in the sterile, sun-bleached hallway of Northwood Elementary and felt an acute sense of irritation. He was here for the photo opportunity, a ritual of corporate benevolence he loathed. He was donating a pallet of gleaming new tablets, an act his public relations department insisted would humanize the Vance Innovations brand. As the beleaguered principal droned on about budgetary shortfalls, his gaze snagged on a small girl pressed against the opposite wall, trying to make herself invisible. It was not her threadbare dress or the watchful quiet in her eyes that caught his attention. It was her feet. They were bare, the small, pale soles stark against the grimy linoleum. A flicker of distaste went through him. He saw not a child in need, but a failure of the system, a sign of parental neglect that offended his precise, orderly view of the world. He turned away, the image already dismissed as an unpleasant anomaly in an otherwise predictable day. He did not know that this single, fleeting image of a shoeless child would unravel the meticulously constructed emptiness of his life. He could not yet understand that in her silent endurance, he would find the answer to a question he had long forgotten how to ask. For this was the story of how a man who had everything learned the true meaning of wealth from a girl who had nothing, a girl who walked through a cold world on bare feet but never lost the warmth in her heart. Ilara was 8 years old, and she understood the language of silence. She knew the particular quiet of the dormitory at the St. Jude's Home for Children just before dawn, when the only sound was the breathing of the 20 other girls in the room. She knew the hushed footsteps she had to take on the cold floorboards to avoid waking the younger ones. Her world was one of carefully preserved things, a single, faded blue sweater that had belonged to her mother, a worn copy of a book about constellations, and a small, perfectly smooth gray stone she had found with her father on their last walk together. These were her treasures. Her routine was a ritual of quiet dignity. Each morning, she would wash her face with cold water from the communal tap, the shock of it a small, sharp reminder that she was awake, that she had survived another night. She would meticulously smooth out her thin, handed-down dress, trying to press the wrinkles out with her small hands. She was an expert at mending, her fingers nimble as she stitched a loose seam or reinforced a worn elbow with thread scrounged from the sewing box. She did this not with sadness, but with a focused sense of purpose. Her parents had taught her to take care of what she had, and she honored their memory in these small, meticulous acts of preservation. The walk to school was the hardest part of her day. A month ago, the worn-out sneakers she had worn for 2 years finally gave up. The sole of the right shoe had split completely, flapping like a sad, tired mouth with every step until it tore away entirely. She had tried to walk in just one, but the lopsided gait was more painful than going without. So now, she walked barefoot. The half-mile journey was a map of textures she knew intimately, the surprising smoothness of the worn-down sidewalk squares, the gritty sandpaper of the freshly paved sections, the treacherous bite of a stray piece of gravel. In autumn, the cold seeped into her bones from the ground up, a deep, persistent ache. At school, she felt the stairs like a physical touch. She heard the whispers, the clipped, cruel sounds of children who did not understand. Look, no shoes, is she dirty? She learned to walk along the edges of the hallways, to sit at the back of the classroom, to make her small body take up as little space as possible. She never cried. She never complained. To do so would be to admit defeat, to let the coldness of the world win. Instead, she retreated into her mind. In class, she listened with an intensity that baffled her teachers. She devoured books, traveling to distant lands and ancient times, worlds where a girl's worth was not measured by what was on her feet. Her grades were flawless, a silent testament to the fierce, resilient mind that refused to be defined by her circumstances. The pain in her feet was a distant hum, a background noise to the vibrant world she explored in the pages of a book. Julian Vance existed in a world that was the polar opposite of Ilara's. His office was a glass-walled sanctuary on the 75th floor of the Vance Tower, a gleaming monument to his ambition. From this vantage point, the city below was a silent, abstract map of his success. The people were specks, the traffic a silent river of light. He preferred it this way. Distance provided clarity and control. His desk was a vast expanse of polished black granite, holding nothing more than a sleek monitor and a single, silver-framed photograph. The photograph was of his wife, Lily, who had died 4 years ago. Her smile in the picture was vibrant, full of a life that felt alien to him now. After Lily's death, Julian had methodically excised emotion from his life, treating it like a faulty line of code that needed to be deleted. He replaced grief with work, pouring every ounce of his formidable intellect and energy into his company. Vance Innovations grew into an empire under his relentless drive. He was lauded in business magazines as a visionary, a genius of efficiency and ruthless strategy. But the man behind the myth was a hollow shell. His magnificent apartment was as sterile as his office. His meals were eaten alone. His conversations were transactions, stripped of any genuine connection. He had built a fortress of wealth and power, but he had locked himself inside it, alone with the ghost of a smile in a silver frame. He saw charity not as an act of compassion, but as a strategic component of corporate governance. It was about tax incentives, brand management, and public perception. The donation of tablets to Northwood Elementary was just another calculated move, a minor task to be delegated and forgotten. He had built a world where everything was quantifiable, predictable, and efficient. The sight of the shoeless girl had bothered him precisely because it was none of those things. It was a messy, illogical piece of data that did not fit into his ordered universe, and his mind, trained to solve problems and eliminate inefficiencies, kept circling back to it, unable to file it away. The day after his visit to the school, the image of the girl's bare feet remained lodged in his mind, an unwelcome and persistent intrusion. During a board meeting about third-quarter profit projections, he found his attention drifting. He saw not the elegant charts and graphs on the screen, but the cold, dirty linoleum of the school hallway. He heard not the confident drone of his chief financial officer, but the imagined sound of whispers following a small, retreating figure. "Are you all right, Julian?" his second-in-command, a sharp man named Marcus, asked, noticing his lapse. Julian's gaze snapped back into focus. "Fine," he said, his voice clipped. "Continue." But he was not fine. The anomaly was growing, turning from a minor irritation into a profound disquiet. He had built his life on the principle of solving problems. If a server was failing, you replaced it. If a market was underperforming, you restructured. But what did you do with the problem of a girl with no shoes? It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was, he realized with a jolt, deeply human. And he had forgotten how to process human problems. Later that afternoon, he called his executive assistant, a hyper-efficient woman named Catherine, into his office. "That school we visited yesterday," he began, staring out the window at the distant, toy-like cars below. "Northwood Elementary. There was a student there, a young girl, without shoes." Catherine's expression remained professionally blank, but she was surprised. It was the first time in years he had shown any personal interest in their charitable endeavors. "I see, Mr. Vance. Is there something you'd like me to do?" "Find out why," he commanded, his voice betraying a sliver of an emotion he could not name. "I want to know her situation. Be discreet." He had expected a simple, sordid explanation. A broken home. Negligent parents. Something that would confirm his cynical worldview and allow him to dismiss the matter. The file Catherine placed on his desk the next day was anything but simple. It was a thin folder containing a few sheets of paper, but its contents were heavier than any financial report he had ever read. Elara Miller. Age 8. Parents, David and Sarah Miller, deceased. A car accident on a rain-slicked road 2 years prior. No living relatives. Ward of the state, residing at St. Jude's Home for Children. The report included a scanned copy of her school records. Perfect attendance. Straight A's. A short, typed note from her teacher, a Mr. Henderson, was attached. It read, "Elara is an exceptionally bright and resilient child. She is quiet and withdrawn, but her written work shows a remarkable depth of thought and imagination. A truly special spirit." Julian stared at the words. Resilient. Special spirit. He read the clinical notes from the orphanage director detailing the recent budget cuts that had eliminated their clothing fund. Her shoes had fallen apart. There was simply no money to replace them. It was not a moral failing. It was not neglect. It was the cold, hard arithmetic of poverty. A girl was walking on frozen pavement because of a line item in a budget. He felt a profound and unfamiliar sensation. It was a crack splintering the frozen surface of his apathy. He looked at the photo of Lily. She had been a social worker before he had made his first billion. She had believed in people. She had fought for children just like Elara. She would have known exactly what to do. She would not have sent an assistant or written a check. She would have gone herself. She would have knelt down, looked the child in the eye, and offered not just shoes, but warmth. Kindness. The thought was like a physical blow. He had spent 4 years building a legacy of steel and glass in her name, but it was a monument to his own grief, not her spirit. He had honored her memory by becoming everything she was not, cold, distant, and disconnected. He had mistaken immense wealth for immense value. A new feeling began to crystallize within him, a sense of shame so acute it was almost nauseating. He looked at the proposal for his new corporate foundation lying on his desk. Its title was The Vance Initiative for Future Technologies. The mission statement was a masterpiece of corporate jargon about synergy, innovation, and empowering digital natives. He picked it up, the glossy, expensive paper feeling slick and meaningless in his hand. He saw it for what it was, a sterile, soulless exercise in brand enhancement. An empty gesture. This, he realized, was his true crisis. Not a failing stock or a competitor's new product, but a catastrophic failure of his own humanity. His vast resources, his army of experts, his global network, none of it could solve the simple, aching problem of a little girl's cold feet. Or rather, they could, but he had never bothered to direct them to do so. He had been aiming his cannons at the stars while the ground crumbled beneath his feet. He buzzed Catherine on the intercom. "Cancel my afternoon," he said, his voice firm, imbued with a purpose it had not held in years. "All of it. But Mr. Vance, you have the quarterly review with the Tokyo board." "Cancel it," he repeated, softer this time, but with an unshakable finality. He stood up and walked to the silver frame on his desk. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the curve of Lily's cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the smiling woman frozen in time. "I'm so sorry. I forgot what was important." He left the office without another word, leaving a stunned Catherine and a schedule full of multi-million-dollar meetings in his wake. He did not take his usual chauffeured car. He drove himself, piloting the sleek, powerful vehicle out of the sterile underground garage and into the messy, unpredictable pulse of the city. He did not go to a high-end department store. He used his car's navigation system to find the address of a wholesale shoe distributor in an industrial part of the city he had not visited in decades, a place of brick warehouses and rumbling trucks. He walked into the cavernous building, his expensive suit and handmade leather shoes utterly out of place. A burly man in a forklift stopped and stared at him. "Can I help you?" the man asked, bewildered. "I need to speak to the owner," Julian said. "I want to buy shoes. Children's shoes." An hour later, Julian's car was followed by a large delivery van. They did not head back downtown. They drove toward Northwood, the neighborhood slowly changing from manicured lawns and stately homes to rows of modest bungalows and low-slung apartment buildings. They drove toward the school. When Julian Vance's gleaming black sedan pulled up outside Northwood Elementary, followed by the unmarked white van, it caused an immediate stir. The principal, a weary woman named Martha Albright, hurried outside, her face a mask of confusion and anxiety. She had assumed the tablet donation was the end of her dealings with the intimidating CEO. "Mr. Vance," she stammered, smoothing down her cardigan. "We weren't expecting you. Is there a problem with the tablets?" "No, Principal Albright," Julian said, his expression serious but not unkind. "There is no problem with the tablets. The problem is with me." He gestured to the back of the van, where his driver and a worker from the warehouse were beginning to unload large cardboard boxes. Box after box landed on the curb. "What is all this?" the principal asked, her eyes wide. "Shoes," Julian said simply. "And socks. And winter boots. Every size." The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. There were dozens of boxes, perhaps more than 100. They formed a small mountain on the sidewalk in front of the unassuming brick schoolhouse. Teachers and students began to gather at the windows, their faces pressed against the glass, murmuring in confusion. "I don't understand," Martha said, truly baffled. "Yesterday, I saw a child in your school without shoes," Julian explained, his voice steady and clear, carrying in the crisp autumn air. "And I made an assumption. I judged. I was wrong. I've spent the last few years building things, companies, technologies, a portfolio. I thought that was what mattered. I've come to realize I haven't been building the right things at all." He looked past the stunned principal, his gaze sweeping over the curious faces in the windows. "I would like your permission to correct my mistake. Not just for one child, but for any child here who needs it. No questions asked." A lump formed in Martha Albright's throat. In her 20 years as an educator in underfunded public schools, she had seen her share of hardship. She had fought endless battles for basic supplies, for heating in the winter, for books that were not falling apart. She had never seen anything like this. This was not a calculated corporate donation. This felt different. It felt personal. She nodded, unable to speak. With her permission, Julian organized the effort with the quiet efficiency of a field marshal. He had the boxes brought into the school gymnasium. He asked the teachers to discreetly identify any child who might be in need, not just those who were obviously without, but those with worn soles, with shoes held together by tape, with boots too small for their growing feet. Elara was in the library, lost in a book about the ocean, when her teacher, Mr. Henderson, gently touched her shoulder. He told her she was needed in the gym. Fear, cold and familiar, coiled in her stomach. The gym was for assemblies, for being singled out. She followed him silently, her bare feet making no sound on the tiled floor. The gymnasium was abuzz with a strange, excited energy. The mountain of cardboard boxes had been opened, revealing rows upon rows of brand new shoes. Sneakers in every color, sturdy brown school shoes, and plush, fur-lined winter boots. The smell of new leather and rubber filled the air. Julian Vance stood in the middle of it all, his suit jacket now off, his sleeves rolled up. He was not making a speech. He was not posing for cameras. He was on one knee, a shoe measuring device in his hand, helping a small, shy first-grade boy find the right fit. The boy's old sneakers, torn at the toes, lay discarded beside him. Julian gently slipped a new, bright blue sneaker onto the boy's foot. "How does that feel?" Julian asked, his voice soft. "Wiggle your toes. Plenty of room?" The boy nodded, his eyes wide with a joy so pure it was heartbreaking. He stood up and took a tentative step, then another, then a small jump. A huge grin split his face. Elara watched from the doorway, frozen. She saw other children from the orphanage, children from her neighborhood, all being treated with the same quiet respect. There was no shame here. No pity. There was only a calm, practical kindness. A teacher led her forward. Julian looked up and their eyes met. He saw not just a problem to be solved, but the face of his own redemption. In her quiet, watchful eyes, he saw the strength he had mistaken for neglect. He saw the dignity he had completely overlooked. He did not approach her directly, not wanting to make a spectacle of her. He simply gestured to one of the female teachers, who came over with a warm smile. "Let's find you something wonderful, sweetie," the teacher said, leading Elara toward a row of sturdy-looking boots. Elara sat on the bench. The teacher measured her foot and came back with a pair of dark purple winter boots. They were lined with soft, thick fleece. As the teacher helped her slide her foot inside, Elara felt a sensation she had not felt in a very long time. Warmth. A deep, enveloping warmth that seemed to travel up from her soul and spread through her entire body. The teacher tied the laces into a neat bow. Elara stood up. She took a step. The floor was no longer cold. The ground beneath her felt solid, supportive, and kind. For the first time, she did not feel the need to press herself against the wall, to be invisible. She stood tall. She looked across the gym at Julian Vance, who was now helping another child. And for the first time since her parents had gone, she felt a glimmer of hope that the world might not be such a cold place after all. A small, hesitant smile touched her lips. It was a vindication not of any special skill, but of her own quiet, enduring humanity, which had finally, unexpectedly, been seen. The event in the gymnasium was not the end of the story, it was the beginning. That evening, Julian did not go back to his empty penthouse. He went to the St. Jude's Home for Children. He met with the director, a kind-faced woman named Elena Gable, whose eyes were etched with the fatigue of someone fighting a constant, uphill battle against dwindling resources. He did not come with grand pronouncements. He came with a question. "What do you need?" he asked. Elena was taken aback. Donors usually told her what they were giving. They dictated the terms. No one ever just asked. Hesitantly at first, then with a growing torrent of passion, she told him. She spoke of the leaking roof, the ancient furnace that struggled through every winter, the need for more tutors, the lack of funding for art supplies and music lessons, the simple, desperate wish for a new set of encyclopedias for the children's small library. Julian listened to every word. He did not take notes. He simply listened, absorbing the reality of a world he had so long ignored. The next day, the Vance Initiative for Future Technologies was officially scrapped. In its place, a new entity was born, the Lilly Foundation, named for his late wife. Its mission statement was simple, written by Julian himself, to provide every child with the safety, support, and resources they need to walk confidently toward their future. It was not about technology or innovation. It was about shoes, warm coats, hot meals, tutoring, and opportunity. It was about building a foundation, not of concrete and steel, but of human kindness. The foundation's first project was the complete renovation and expansion of St. Jude's. Construction crews arrived within the week. The leaking roof was replaced. A new, efficient heating system was installed. The dormitories were repainted in bright, cheerful colors. A new library and learning center was built, stocked not just with encyclopedias, but with computers, art supplies, musical instruments, and thousands of new books. Julian was there almost every day, not as a distant benefactor, but as a hands-on participant, often consulting with Elena and even the children about the designs. He and Elara formed a quiet, unlikely friendship. He started volunteering as a reader at the home, and he would often find her in the new library, devouring a book. He learned about her love for stars and her dream of one day becoming a teacher. She, in turn, learned about the man behind the corporate armor. He told her about Lily, about her kindness and her laugh. In talking to this small, serious girl, he found he could finally speak of his wife without the crushing weight of grief, remembering not just what he had lost, but what she had given him. Elara became the quiet, steadfast compass for his new life, a constant reminder of the purpose he had found. Years unfurled, each one filled with progress and healing. The Lilly Foundation grew into a powerful force for good, expanding its reach to schools and orphanages across the state, and then the country. It became a model for compassionate, effective philanthropy, always guided by its founding principle: listen first, then act. Julian Vance, the ruthless tech titan, was transformed. The hardness in his eyes softened, replaced by a warmth and empathy that had long been dormant. He still ran his company, but its mission had changed, with a new focus on ethical technology and corporate responsibility. He found more satisfaction in opening a new community center than in closing a billion-dollar deal. Elara flourished. Given the safety and resources she had always lacked, her brilliant mind and resilient spirit soared. She excelled in school, becoming a leader and a mentor to the younger children at the newly revitalized St. Jude's. She volunteered for the foundation, her own experiences giving her a unique ability to connect with children facing similar hardships. She was living proof of the foundation's impact. The epilogue of their story took place a decade later, on a bright, sunny afternoon. Julian sat in the audience at a prestigious university's graduation ceremony. He was older now, his hair streaked with silver, but his smile was genuine and easy. He was not on the stage, he was just another proud face in the crowd. The valedictorian was announced, a young woman with a calm, confident presence and eyes that held a deep well of wisdom. "It is my honor to introduce Elara Miller," the dean announced. Elara walked to the podium, her steps sure and steady. She looked out at the sea of faces, and her gaze found Julian. She smiled, the same quiet, meaningful smile he remembered from the school gymnasium all those years ago. "We are often told that to succeed, we must pull ourselves up by our bootstraps," she began, her voice clear and strong. "But that assumes we all have boots to begin with. Some of us start the journey with nothing on our feet, on cold, hard ground. True strength is not just in the walking, but in the enduring. And true grace is found in those who stop, kneel down, and offer a hand, and a new pair of shoes, to a fellow traveler." Julian felt a tear trace a path down his cheek. He thought of Lily, and for the first time, the memory was one of pure, unadulterated joy. He had finally built something she would have been proud of. He had learned the most profound lesson of his life from a quiet orphan girl, that a person's true net worth has nothing to do with the numbers in a bank account. It is measured in the lives you touch, the burdens you lighten, and the potential you help to unleash. It is measured in the simple, transformative act of ensuring a child can walk toward her future, warm, supported, and free from pain.